All right. Hello, everybody. We've got Josh Kauffman here with us today as part of our series on the worker proposal system proposals and that whole aspect. And so we've got 3 videos that are done. We've got Josh here who's agreed to come on and discuss more of the high level, what the worker proposal system is, what's been happening, kind of the background and that to bring us back and bring us up to date as to where they are. So redefine the context and everything. So Josh, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Yves. It's been a great series to follow along with. There's a lot of people have a lot of questions, so it's a great way to clarify those questions bit by bit, specific to each proposal. So what I want to do today is to basically walk through what we as the core, maybe that's an improper name for it, but the working group that's been working towards building a WPS system. We have a few ideas that we've worked through, we've iterated a bunch of times, and this is the current proposal as it stands. I'll basically switch over right now. I'll start sharing my screen.
Excellent. And in terms of proposal, Josh, when you say that, if we're looking at the Medium post that was shared where there were the 4 clear sub-proposals in a way, or yours, what you're presenting right now, can we find it somewhere? And if so, then I'll link it afterwards so that everybody can go either see this particular presentation or is there kind of a reference link where people can go and get some information on this?
Yeah, I'm actually just finalizing up a whole article that explains it and walks through it all.
Excellent.
That should be out hopefully this weekend, if not by Monday. We're just getting it translated into Chinese as well.
Excellent.
It goes out and everyone can read it.
All right, thank you.
Great, so I just wanted to confirm you can see my screen.
I can, yes.
Excellent, so let me go full screen on this. Okay, so.
And just for the auditors, just for the viewers, the way that we're going to, Josh has previously agreed, we're going to do a back and forth just like we did with the other videos. That way it keeps it a little bit more organic in terms of free flow. So Josh, go for it.
Great. So the current setup as it stands on EOS is that there's 5% of inflation. 1% of the inflation is used to pay block producers, and the other 4% are currently flowing into an account called eosio.saving. That account today, I think it's almost at around 10 million tokens. It should basically get to 40 million tokens in the first year, roughly, because it's 4% of a billion. So the next thing that we'd like to see is the creation of a new account called eosio.wps, something like that, just to stand for the worker proposal system. The reason being is that we don't want to start testing out a new structure with the entire 10 million tokens. It's a large honeypot, could be attacked. We're just afraid of what could happen, and also the optics of taking 10 million tokens and trying something out that hasn't fully been tested with the community yet. So the first step is create that new account. Then
and sorry, who would have access to this account? So can you explain just for the viewers, who currently has access to the EOSIO savings account, a saving account, and who would have access to this EOSIO WPS account?
So I'll back up here. The eosio.saving account is accessible by eosio.prods. For people that don't know what prods means, it's basically the current list of the top 21 producers in the US. The signing authority of prods is 15 of the 21, which is why you always hear that 15 of 21 block producers are needed to sign something to have consensus. So right now, all the eosio.x accounts are controlled by prods. So then going forward to create the WPS account, in terms of who would have access to it, I'm pushing to have prods have control over that because it's still an EOSIO account, and also have some controls built in for the emergency category committee members to also have some signing authority on that account. The reason being is we don't want to have to always go to the block producers and have a 15 of 21 signature every time we want money to move in and out of that account. By having a referendum to create this whole system, that should give the authority to these 7 very visible, publicly known members to have control based on the community's will. So they won't be moving money in and out willy-nilly. They're going to have to see a referendum or some sort of community signal that says, yes, we want to give X amount of tokens to Y person.
So if theoretically, and there might be no answer to this, but theoretically, if, for example, some of the proposals, if they are decoupled, so the other four that have been presented, if they're decoupled, and let's say some pass and emergency committee does not pass, how would the other committees gain access to tokens if then this WPS account would not be created because it'd be useless if there's no emergency committee? Why not just leave it in the savings and have the block producers? They're the only ones who are prods, could send them down. So have you thought about that? Has the committee thought about this?
Yeah, so if prods, well, sorry, I shouldn't say if, but right now prods has authority over ESIO.saving. If there's a referendum held and they say, hey, fund proposition 1, 2, 3, and not number 4, and let's say this whole system is number 4, well, 1, 2, and 3 have still been given a signal by the community to please fund them. So now it's incumbent on the block producers to step in and say, yes, give money
to send those funds.
Yeah. The only problem there is now there's no oversight or specific oversight over those proposals. Part of this WPS group and the emergency committee itself is to provide oversight. So that means reporting feedback to the community saying, here's where the money was supposed to go, here's where it has gone, here's what they're working on and all that, rather than every community member being responsible to go to each and every proposal and say, hey, did you guys do what you're going to say? Did you do what you said you were going to do? I want to basically make it as simple and have a single place for everyone to go.
So for those of you who have questions on what Josh just mentioned, we won't go into the details of the emergency committee. I did a full video with David Margulies on the emergency committee proposal. So if you have other questions on that, I invite you to go watch the other video.
Yeah. I just hit ahead by accident, sorry. Okay, so we're gonna have this new account created, the WPS account. The hope is to move in the million, and the remaining balance, so roughly 9 million currently, but it's gonna continue to grow until the referendum is passed or not. The remaining balance would go into a burn account. It would sit within the burn account until the community said, do X with it, do Y with it. They just have to give us their thought.
So this is part of the proposal, so it wouldn't stay in the saving account. It would actually go to a burn account. That's part of the proposal.
Correct. And I'll touch on that a little further on why that is.
Thank you.
Also, going into a burn account, there's something to note within EOS that's different than, say, with Ethereum or Bitcoin.
Yes.
Is that when you burn tokens, they're still somewhat accessible within EOS, because burning in the typical sense means moving tokens into an account that does not have any keys assigned to it. But because EOS is different in that 15 of 21, the prods account, as we said before, can theoretically have access to any account if and when needed. This is used for arbitration, for system upgrades, or for smart contracts that may go awry. That same ability could be used to access a burn account. So there's also a different mechanism within EOS. It's a way of retiring tokens. Just to give a quick and dirty example, let's say there's 1 billion tokens in existence and the community wants to retire 100 million of those tokens, then the new token circulation would actually be 900 million. Whereas if you just burn it, there's still an account that's part of circulation, which is very hard to get to them. So it would go into a burn account until the community said, yes, leave it burnt, no, move it back into saving, retire it. We don't want to make that decision. We just want to segregate it so it's clear kind of how the structure of everything is.
And the idea, I think you mentioned it, I think we don't necessarily have clear definition of terms in terms of burning, because burning, we've had this discussion before, what does burning mean? And there are multiple definitions of what burning means. And what you're talking about right now is that retirement portion of they're retired out of the system is very different than burning them. Some people, I believe, have, there's another definition would be to destroy those tokens. So by retiring them, the tokens still exist. They're just out of circulation. They're not destroyed. Correct?
Sorry, I just want to make sure I follow you. Burning in the typical sense means they're still in circulation. Retiring means they are out of circulation. They are destroyed completely. It's as if the issuance never happened.
Okay. But in EOS, there's a method to go back and get those tokens potentially if they're retired.
If they're burnt, EOSIO prods could always go back and access an account that has no keys by assigning keys to it.
Exactly.
It should also be noted, even if you retire tokens, EOSIO prods also has the ability to issue new tokens.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, because it's DPoS, we're giving a lot of trust to the BPs, and that's why we've all voted for them. And
exactly,
we want to be represented by good and hardworking and knowledgeable BPs, because they do have power over the chain, and it's our ability to vote them in and out is what keeps that power in check.
And this is where we have the 15 out of 21. This is where we have the consensus mechanism built in to EOS. Yeah. So thank you. I just wanted to clarify that for people because we did have lengthy discussions on what burning even means in EOS, seeing as we're in such a system. So again, I hope that you guys understood, the people viewing, I hope you understood the distinction here because we're found in EOS.io.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to continue on. Sorry, just one sec. Sorry, I'm just getting over pneumonia.
Oh, that's bad. Well, thank you for joining us.
That's okay. So the next step would be the creation of this emergency category that will be run by 7 committee members. The emergency category, they would have access to those million tokens, not for their own benefit, but to be used in a way that the community tells them to use it based on referendum. So they would be put in place, and their end goal would be to deprecate themselves from the system and be replaced by other categories that pop up. It's just a bootstrapping. I actually prefer, instead of emergency category, to call it the bootstrapping category. We just have to start somewhere, and this is the first place to start and get rid of it as quickly as we can. So then the next step, sorry, I skipped ahead, would be for the emergency category to oversee the creation of 5 new categories that we've envisioned so far. It's possible that going forward down the road, that through referendums, that the community says, hey, these aren't the 5 that we want, or hey, we need a 6th maybe, or we need 4 that'll control everything. But this is what we're putting forward. This is what's currently being proposed, and this is the system that we see as being needed.
And when you say we, just because I'm going to ask you at some point, might as well ask you now, who's we?
So there's been a little working group that's been put together. We've been working together on this for, I'd say, about 3 months now. Thomas Cox was the one who started it. There's been people moving in and out, so I probably won't be able to name everyone because a lot of people have had their hand on giving contributions, giving thoughts. But the main players have been myself, Brandon Espinoza, David Margulies, Orchid from EOS, Chris Pollard, Larry Ma. I'm sure I'm missing a couple of others there, but Leo from Node 1. But we've been just kind of volunteering our time, anywhere from 10 to 40 hours a week, some of us. I think even David Margulies is at 60 hours a week sometimes. Just kind of volunteering our time to help grab what the community is telling us, try and work it out, and create a system that makes sense. Oh, actually, one person I forgot that definitely needs a mention is Todor. He's been great at helping us. He's great at doing game theory. So how will this be gamed? What could someone do to try and break this or use it for their own good? He's been great at helping us work through those examples.
And I think it's important to mention that all of this, such as anything else in EOS, it's just whoever shows up, right? This is not a private club. Anybody could show up to this and just start contributing. And this has been done through open channels. There was quite a bit of publicity when this came about, like, come and join this channel, come and join this channel. And so it's really anybody who is interested in talking about what would we potentially do at some point in the future with that 4%, join those channels and just start talking about it. And this is what you're presenting right now, is where the thought is after 3 months worth of work has gone into this, correct?
Correct, yeah. This looks completely different than how I envisioned it at first, and we've had multiple iterations since then. There's been a lot of, like I said before, in and out. So people that were very vocal, very good at participating within those discussions, in channels with 500-600 people in them, we kind of pulled them in and said, hey, do you want to help out? We see you're good at XYZ task, or is this too much for you? Maybe you don't want to continue on with this. We've had quite a few people drop out because the time commitment's been so large, but there's been a few of us that have just stuck with it. We really think that the WPS is very important for decentralization of the EOS network. So we just want to put in the time, get it to where it needs to be, and then hand it over to the community.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the 5 categories that we envision would be infrastructure. So that would take care of things like GitHub management repo. GitHub repo management, I should say. Creating and testing new code, doing security fixes. Oversight would be for things such as, as mentioned before, are the proposals spending money as they should? Are they doing what they said they would? Are they up to date with their milestones? Are they lagging behind? Are they going to run out of money for whatever reason and need to fix something? And for a new proposal that wants to come in, if they need help, crafting their proposal, what's the best way to get a community response? Who are the people to talk to about certain things that they may not know about? That'll be kind of their role. As well as, even though there's these 5 categories, someone could still choose to go on their own, create a referendum and say, hey, I want funding from eosio.saving, and oversight committee will help them craft that so they have the best chance of getting their referendum passed.
So question for you, Josh. Emergency committee, the intent is to bootstrap this in the short term, and the idea that David shared was that they would phase out as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
How is emergency not going to become oversight?
Well, for the moment now, it will be the one providing oversight. The people that are within the emergency category could say, hey, we want to run for oversight. I'll explain a little bit later on how that happens. So it could be the same people. But going forward, it's just a matter of people will have to be voted in and accepted as being the oversight. Currently, the emergency committee is not people that have been voted in.
Technically, they'd be voted in if, so emergency has submitted a proposal. If that proposal passes by referendum, not theoretically, they are literally voted in.
Yeah.
How would they not become oversight?
The difference is, going forward, we hope to not see a single group of people put themselves up for voting for a category. We hope to see, multiple, 5, 10, however many is needed to create a lot of great teams that people can choose between and say, yes, that is the team that I think will do a great job based on their reputation, based on their past performance, based on the skill set and knowledge that they bring to EOS. So while right now they're being voted in because they're kind of packaged with this system, we'd like to see teams be voted in based on their thought and their merit and the competition. Right now, for WPS, there just isn't the competition that would be great to see on EOS.
Thank you.
Yeah. Excuse me. So moving on, community would be the next one. That would be for things such as meetups, funding anything that will help bring people into the community. So instead of, having maybe we want to set up for the community something like, instead of having a referendum for every time a meetup wants to happen and they want to request 100 tokens, that may lead to voter apathy and overwhelming the voters. Let's say that community category can allocate 100 tokens at a time or whatever amount without the need to go back to the voters constantly. But there might be an easier way to say, hey, that team is not doing a great job, so they have a check and balance built in. The idea is that we want to promote EOS going forward. We want to, I should say, our hope is that people will want to promote EOS going forward. So there should be a way to fund that promotion in that mechanism.
And do you envision right now, I'm sure there's been talk about it, would BPs be able to apply for those community funds?
Yes.
I'm just thinking, for example, EOS Nation often sponsors events way larger than 100 EOS tokens at a time. So you mentioned, for example, 100. So how would this be managed? So would there be, and I'm kind of leading into the question, but for all these 5 categories, who would be managing these categories? How do we determine what goes in there? And is this the oversight committee that manages within? Are they the overarching? Like, can you talk about a little bit about that governance structure?
So the goal, and I'm going to get this in one of the next slides, but I'll start it now, is that each category should have its own governance structure if need be. So there might be 5 teams competing to be the infrastructure category, let's say, and maybe there could be 5 different governance structures. Maybe one says, hey, this should be a committee of 15 people. Maybe another says, hey, there should be no committee at the top and it should just be a referendum amongst this group of people. Maybe there's a group of vetted developers and they should have control over the development fund. And none of them are at the top, but these 100 developers will vote, and they could. So basically, what I'm trying to get at,
proxies, so there are different governance methods per category depending on what it is the community would determine is best for that particular category.
Exactly. So emergency's role would be to oversee the voting in of these different governance structures and people that would help to facilitate that. So there is no answer. The whole idea is, who are we, a group of people that have just been working on this, to decide that for the future of EOS. We just want to build a framework so that the community can decide that and what's best for them, and also ensuring that going forward, whatever is decided also has a mechanism in place to be removed and deprecated and replaced with something else. We don't want to see anyone voted in, or we don't want to see a system that allows someone to be voted in where they can kind of exist forever. That's a completely antithesis to the ethos of EOS.
So what you're saying is you'd have systems in place where perhaps it'd be through term limits or other functions where these groups would change over time?
Correct. They'd either change, or they'd have to at least come up for vote over time, or they would have to at least have a mechanism that anyone can say, hey, I can do a better job. Here's the community voting and saying they would like me to do this job instead.
Okay.
Okay, so just moving, and development I touched on in there, and miscellaneous is just kind of a catch-all, the things that we can't define now. And through miscellaneous, you might say, hey, there's a ton of proposals that fall into miscellaneous that they're all related in some way. Maybe that's a signal we need to create a sixth category. That's why it's there, just a catch-all.
And are these simply for emergency funds? You mentioned that 1 million tokens. So is the 1 million put aside for emergency projects only, or what you're discussing right now, is that for anything and everything going forward potentially, but using that as a test pool, kind of like a test net for that full 4% at some point, or whatever percentage that may be?
So the million tokens will be first used for the 4 proposals that are currently on the table: development of the full WPS system, GitHub repo management, ECAF, and I'm blanking on the 4th one right now, but that 4th one.
Okay, did you mention the GitHub repository? Anyways, yes, there are 4. The GitHub repository, the ECAF, the emergency committee proposal, as well as the portal itself.
Oh yeah, and yeah, exactly. The 4th one was this proposal itself. And it should be noted that for this proposal, it's an extremely small amount. It's more honorarium. So the 7 committee members would be receiving a single EOS token just as an honorarium. Thank you for your service. We're clearly not paying you very much for your time. They'll be getting 2 EOS a month, and we're expecting them to do, let's say, 16 hours a month of work for 2 EOS. So then that first million would be for those 4.
Okay.
And then going forward, the whole mechanism for this isn't clearly defined yet, because we're working through some community feedback on how does it now replenish. So the current thought right now at this moment, and it could change tomorrow, is that the 4% that flows into EOSIO saving is maybe we burn 90% of that as it flows in, and a small portion goes into WPS. Maybe it's we don't burn anything and everything flows into WPS. There are many different paths we can take, but right now that's only the million tokens is for the emergency system and oversight of the voting in of the other categories.
So there's nothing stopping, for example, let's say I'm a viewer and I am in favor of having some tokens put aside for the growth of the ecosystem through this WPS account. But I think that perhaps 4% is too much. And I also like, let's say, Dan's new proposal on URI, the Universal Resource Inheritance. One does not exclude the other, although there's only 4% to play with, but that 4% could be rejigged around. So if I'm a voter, I could potentially like both. That is possible.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. I know we should have our proposal out, maybe out before this video even comes out. There's been a lot of community feedback coming in. So what is the best mechanism for that? But the goal with the different categories is that they'll only each have access to, we're proposing 10% of what lies within WPS at a time.
So 10% after, let's say, the other 4 proposals that have been brought up are approved. I don't recall what the total amount is. It's close to 400,000 EOS. I think it's 348,000 EOS. So 10% after these tokens are done, or 10% including those tokens?
10% after these tokens are pulled out.
Thank you.
But like I said, that could be subject to change based on how will WPS be replenished. Will it be replenished? Maybe the community says, hey, we want to see those categories run for 6 months before we turn the faucet, quote unquote, back on.
Yeah, that analogy.
Yeah. So we're just not sure because we need a lot more community feedback. And I think that's something personally that should be put up for vote. And it's just not decided as of yet.
But what is being proposed, again, what you're showcasing today and what we're going through right now is what is being proposed, and then the community can determine whether or not they accept this proposal and or communicate, maybe make some recommendations to change this before it goes up for vote. Exactly. Once it goes up for vote, then again, everything is predicated upon that referendum and being able to then vote on other portions of this. So this is ongoing work. So as much as you're proposing something today, the work is never done.
Correct. At the end of the day, we can't posit that we know what the future holds, and we need to just collect data points. So
and I think that's important for the viewers to know, is that you guys and girls are here today because you've been doing work for 3 months, but it doesn't mean that you have all the answers, and you've repeated this multiple times. This is a community-driven change. This is decentralized. People will come in and out, and this will morph over time based on community feedback. Exactly.
All right. So then, as we're talking about, as I kind of delved into in that last slide, because we got a little sidetracked, is that the emergency category would oversee the bringing in of these new categories. And so our hope is to see multiple versions of oversight, multiple versions of development, and so on and so on. We don't want to be left, our hope is that we're not left with a single proposal for infrastructure, because we want to make sure the community has somewhere to choose. Everyone keeps saying, hey, I didn't get to choose such and such person, or I didn't get to choose such and such a producer to run this development, or whatever it may be. We want to make sure that the community is getting what they want, because the one thing that we keep hearing is community wants choices and the community wants to be heard. So we want to build a system that allows for that to happen.
Has thought been put into the current referendum structure, and structure is not the right word, the parameters on how a particular question gets passed by a referendum? You get that 15% minimum, you need that 10% more yeses than nos for a sustained period of 30 days within a 120-day period. Would all of these changes, all these votes, all these proposals be within those particular parameters? Has thought been put into, because that was originally designed for constitutional changes, are we looking at the same parameters for perhaps these proposals? Is there anything right now that the worker proposal team has been thinking of, so that we're not waiting perhaps 4 months at a time for something simple?
Yeah, so to put in the entire WPS structure, to us, that's an EOS
a major change. Yeah,
that needs to go through the major 15%, 10% more yeses than nos. But going forward, we can put in there and have the community say, hey, maybe to create an oversight committee takes 5% participation or 10% participation. We don't have that answer, and that's something that is going to be open for the community to decide upon. I think that at the very least, making changes that replace a bad actor with a good actor should be somewhat easy to do, but bringing someone in and saying, hey, that's the person that we want, should be hard to do, because then it becomes easy for a whale to say, hey, get rid of that person because I think he's a bad actor, and then they become a bad actor themselves. So there's a fine balance there, but at the end of the day, we're not the right people to say this is what it's going to be, that's what it's going to be, because that's not our role, that's not our job, and no one should have that authority over the chain. It should be the community coming together and saying, hey, it takes this amount of participation or this amount of yeses more than nos. I foresee a referendum happening just on that very question itself. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next one. So the end goal is to basically deprecate the emergency committee. So you see now in the flow, it goes from EOSIO, the funds, the 4% or the 2%, the 1%, whatever it is, eventually flows into the saving account, and then funds from there, based upon the burn that is accepted by the community and chosen by the community, will go into the WPS account, and then a portion of that amount in WPS will flow into development, miscellaneous community. We may see over time that, hey, development actually needs access to way more funds than community does, so we'll have to tinker with those percentages as we collect more data. And it should be noted, like before, I'd said that each category would have access to 10% of WPS. As you can see, there's 5 categories. It's only 50%. So there is still going to be some funds held in reserve, as the community might say, hey, we need to give these guys more funds because they're doing a great job. But instead of having to change a major structure again, maybe it's a smaller, maybe the community says, hey, that kind of change only takes, 5% voting for 5 days, whatever it may be. There could be different rules and regulations set up for different spots. So that's why it's a very good question, but there is no hard answer right now because the community has to tell us.
So when I'm looking at this slide, I'm thinking back at one of the previous slides you have where EOS-IO saving goes to EOS-IO WPS. EOS-IO WPS was being managed by emergency committee in terms of who has access to the keys and who can delegate funds. And the role of oversight is somewhat to replace at some point the emergency committee. How does the oversight category get to control funds and or perhaps control, not control is not the right word, but oversee infrastructure, community, miscellaneous, and development if they're not the ones that have the control over the WPS keys? And if they do have access to the WPS keys, how is that not a conflict of interest because they could control their own funds for their own category? So why do I see, why is EOS-IO WPS even needed in this particular slide? Why wouldn't it go directly to EOS-IO saving, to oversight to the other 4?
That's a very good question. Part of that too is we're hoping that the development of the WPS portal, and I should have touched on this before, that the development of the WPS portal gets funded, and the portal itself that is currently being built out by Jay and a whole team of people that you've had on, is for that to have some automation in place that'll take care of all of this. The goal is not to have the community or a chosen group of people have control over a large amount of funds. It's that the system itself should be in control. So let's create automation where we can.
Okay.
It's not built in here because we don't know how it's going to look exactly. It's still being built out, and we don't know if the community will accept it. So it's a very good question in that who will oversee it, and it's possible that it may have to, like you said, flow into oversight and then out to the others. But that'll depend on what gets voted in and what the community wants. We just don't know that yet until the community actually votes.
And have you thought of rules in terms of people who are currently representing multiple proposals, in the sense that if I sit on the oversight committee, but I also sit on one of the development committees, wouldn't I be in conflict of interest to obviously vote for the project that I'm looking for? Because I know that certain people are right now in multiple of these proposals. So if in the future they're on oversight and they're also on the development, isn't that a conflict of interest? And how would you, I guess you kind of answered it, if it's the portal that's managing it and if it's automated, but if it's not, have you thought about perhaps putting rules in place where people can't be on multiple committees?
To me, that's something it's kind of like DApps. It's voted in. People will vote for something or not vote for something based on how they feel. Personally, I agree with you. I think there could be a conflict of interest. But a voter might say, hey, maybe that person X is great at doing oversight and they're great at doing development and they should be voted in. And that's not for me or you or anyone or a group of anyone to say, hey, you can't vote that way. So the community is going to vote how they vote, and they're going to take all of that into consideration. The point of what we're trying to do is to be able to point out things like that and say, hey, that person's here and there. There's potential for X conflict, just so you know, going into it when you're voting. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
So that's the end of the slideshow.
Awesome.
And
okay,
so if you have any other questions.
I guess I do have one question. So you've been working on this for a significant period of time right now. What do you see are the challenges going forward with all that's being proposed? So this is somewhat of a complicated, not complicated, complex governance layer that potentially is being added on. How can me, let's say, as an end user, as a token holder, know why and have the information to determine whether or not I want to vote for this system? Like, where are the challenges, and what can you how can you simplify things so that people can make an informed decision on what is being proposed?
The main challenge is education. I keep reading again and again. Someone says, hey, I didn't know that this was possible in EOS, or I didn't know there was 4% inflation going to a WPS account in EOS. And then they find out and they're a little bit upset. They said, I was not aware of this. This is not a good thing. I want to stop it right now. People are afraid of change. They're afraid of something new, and rightfully so. They should educate themselves. But I think getting out there and making sure, like by doing videos like this, I think it's a great initiative. We're going to educate people so they can become involved. They can be part of the discussion, because at the end of the day, it may turn out that no one wants to see WPS on chain. Maybe no one wants to see other major feature of EOS that has been talked about for a year now. They don't want to see that, and that's the beauty of a community chain, is we can change things as we see fit, based upon signals that are given through a referendum. So there's no clear-cut answer, and how do we make sure things can get through? Or it's just a matter of educating everyone as much as we can. The hardest part is going to be we're a global community. We want to make sure that things are translated in multiple languages, so it's accessible to as many people as possible, and that we make sure to take the time to receive their questions and then answer their questions in a way that makes sense to them. I see a lot of people jump into a Telegram chat or a WeChat group, and they'll ask a question. Someone responds to that question, maybe very quickly or abruptly, and they'll give part of the answer, or maybe there's a follow-up question that then doesn't get responded to. So we need to make sure there's a very pointed place for people to come and be able to ask a question in a way that they're comfortable in. So that's why the 7 members or 8 members that are being posed, so 7 plus 1 alternate for the emergency committee. There's people that speak Korean, there's people that speak English, there's people that speak Chinese. Those are the 3 main languages that are being touched upon within EOS. I want to make sure there's a place for all of those people to come, a person that they can message directly and say, hey, I have this question, I can't find the answer, where can I find that? It kind of aggregates answers and responses, and we need to be able to point people properly to say, here's where you go for that answer.
So other than the current Telegram channel, where else can people find information about this? Because one of the things that David mentioned when I did the emergency committee proposal video with him was he doesn't want people to simply vote no because they felt that they couldn't affect change before this goes up to proposal. He said, listen to this video, read the information that we presented. If you have any concerns, let's discuss now so that we could potentially make changes to the proposal, so that the proposal that goes up has had already community feedback, and you don't simply vote no because you thought that there was no way to change this. So where else can people find information on what you've discussed today and what the other proposals are?
Best place to go other than Telegram at the moment is on Medium. We've been trying to post a lot of things onto Medium. A lot of people are already using Medium. It's a way that they get news and they aggregate opinions from people. I'm on WeChat. Maybe I should. I can't. There's no link really. It's the QR code.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe that's something to do. Make a Medium post and put QR codes for all of the people that have access to some of the knowledge that you can kind of grab us on WeChat. I know there's a Korean messenger. I think it's called Kakao or something like that.
Kakao or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe Orchid would be great at organizing community there. Right now, Telegram's been our main area for communication, just because that's where the largest English-speaking section is, and it's been the easiest because a lot of the material that's being put out around EOS has been in English. So it's just been a natural flow, and not to say that that's right, and it is incumbent upon us to make sure to have those things accessible. Something like the Ignite conference that John Dam put together a month or 2 back now. It was 24 hours, so it got to people all across the globe. It was in multiple languages. Things like that are great places to start to gather information, develop your questions, And then for reaching out, currently Telegram is the best, and WeChat's away. I'm going to get it to you so you'll be able to put it in the show notes.
Yeah. So what we'll do afterwards, we'll put down below the Telegram channel. We'll put down the Medium channel, and for our viewers, we always translate. We do a summary of this video in English and in Chinese. But we also we publish this out as much as possible. And like you said, I think it needs to go out in as many of the 3 main languages that are being used as possible. And then we'll put all the information below so that people can participate. Thank you very much, Josh, for coming on. Thank you very much for shedding a little bit more insight on the worker proposal system governance portion of kind of the high level, what the intent is. Any last words before we go?
No, just thank you very much. This is a great initiative, super appreciated by me. Even though I'm so involved, I'm still learning more and more things from the videos, because you're great at pulling out those little bits of areas that are not quite clear yet. So yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm sure the community does as well.
Awesome. So everybody, thank you very much. Thank you, Josh. Hit the like button, subscribe below. That way you'll get some more information, and peace out.